The stagecoach lurched to a halt, but Alara Thorne was already descending, her haste almost sending her sprawling into the unforgiving dust of Rattlesnake Ridge. People would recall her tears first, a desperate cascade on a woman too old for such public displays. They would remember how the woman, nearly 40, in her plain indigo dress, stood in the middle of that dry Montana station, her shoulders shaking, her gloved hands pressed to her face as if she had been holding herself together for 1,000 miles and finally could not anymore. But Silas Rook, aged 38, remembered something else. He remembered how alone she looked. Silas had been leaning against a weathered hitching post outside the station, boot resting on the lower rail, a wide-brimmed felt hat tipped low against the relentless sun. He had come into town for supplies and a letter he did not expect to receive. He had not come looking for trouble. He had not come looking for a woman crying in the middle of the street. Yet there she was, Jebediah Horn, the stagecoach driver, a man in his mid-50s, climbed down from the coach, shaking dust from his coat. Long ride from Cheyenne. He muttered to no one in particular. Storm caught us near Black Mesa. But Silas's eyes stayed on Alara. She was not dressed like someone merely passing through. Her dress was simple but good quality. Her boots were clean despite the dust. A small trunk was lowered behind her, followed by a tapestry bag. She snatched it up quickly, holding it tight against her chest, as if it was the only thing she trusted. A few townsfolk slowed their steps. Curiosity was common in Rattlesnake Ridge. Strangers were not. Silas pushed away from the post. He did not rush. He never rushed, but he walked steady toward her. When he came close, he removed his hat. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "you all right?" She lowered her hands slowly. Her eyes were red and swollen and her cheeks wet. But there was something proud in the way she lifted her chin. She was trying to stand straight, even as her lips trembled. "I am fine," she said at once. The lie was gentle but clear. Silas glanced around at the watching faces. "You don't look fine," he answered, voice calm. "And this town ain't kind of folks who break down in the street." Her eyes flickered with fear at that. "I did not mean to draw attention," she whispered. "I only needed a moment." Another tear slipped down before she could stop it. She wiped it away quickly, embarrassed. Silas stepped slightly to the side, blocking her from some of the staring eyes. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Alara Thorne." "Silas Rook." She nodded once. The driver dragged her trunk closer and looked between them. "She's the one answered that advertisement," Jebediah said. "Figured someone would be waiting." Silas's jaw tightened slightly. He had placed that advertisement 3 months ago. Astra's frontier cattleman seeks steadfast companion. Home, honesty, and hard work valued. Asterisk, he had received 5 letters. For had stopped writing once they learned how far Rattlesnake Ridge truly was from anywhere that mattered. Alara Thorne had not stopped writing. Her letters from Ohio had been neat, thoughtful, careful. She had written about growing up, about losing her parents young, about wanting a place where she could belong. She had not written about arriving in tears. Silas cleared his throat. "I was waiting," he said simply. Alara looked at him fully then, as if truly seeing him for the first time. He was broad-shouldered, sun-worn, his beard trimmed close, and his dark eyes steady and unreadable. He did not look cruel. He did not look soft either. She searched his face for something. Disappointment, judgment, regret. He gave her none of it. "I apologize," she said, her voice shaking again. "This is not how I wished to arrive." "That's so," he replied gently. "How did you wish to arrive? With dignity? You still have it." The words caught her off guard. She stared at him. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You don't have to pretend with me," he said. "Not here. Not in front of me." Her breath hitched. For a moment, she looked as though she might deny everything again. Then her shoulders sagged. "I'm afraid," she admitted. The truth seemed to cost her something. Silas nodded once. "Of me?" he asked. "No." She shook her head quickly. "Of starting over, but of failing again." He studied her carefully. "Rattlesnake Ridge ain't Philadelphia," he said. "Ain't Cheyenne either. Folks here care more about how you carry water than how you carry gossip." She swallowed. "There is gossip," she said softly. "About you." She looked down at the tapestry bag in her hands. Yes. Silas did not press. He simply picked up her trunk and carried it toward his buckboard. You can tell me on the ride, he said. Or not. But standing here, crying won't change anything. She hesitated only a second before following him. He helped her into the buckboard without touching her more than necessary. She sat stiffly, clutching the bag to her chest again as if it held something fragile. He climbed up beside her and flicked the reins. The horses, Maverick and Daisy, moved forward, leaving the station and the curious stares behind. For a while, there was only the sound of wheels over dirt and wind through dry grass. Rattlesnake Ridge faded behind them. The open land stretched wide and golden under the late afternoon sun. Alara stared straight ahead. I was engaged once, she said suddenly. Silas did not look at her. All right. He was well respected. His father owned the largest store in our town in Ohio. She paused, gathering courage. When I ended the engagement, he told people I had behaved improperly, that I had led him on, that I was unstable. Her voice trembled again, but she kept speaking. People believed him. It was easier than believing a woman might refuse a man simply because she did not love him. Silas's hands tightened slightly on the reins. My position as a schoolteacher was taken away. Invitations stopped coming. Friends stopped calling. She gave a quiet but broken laugh. I did not cry then. I kept my chin up. I told myself I did not need them. She finally turned to him. But when the stagecoach pulled into this town, I saw how small it was, how far from everything I know. I realized I have nowhere else left to go if this fails. There was the real fear. Silas slowed the buckboard slightly as his ranch, Silas's spread, came into view in the distance. A modest log cabin, a barn, fencing stretching across open land. If this fails, he repeated calmly, it won't be because of gossip from Ohio. She searched his face again. You are not angry? I did not tell you. You told me enough, he replied. You said you wanted honesty, hard work, a place to build something real. Ido. Then that's what matters. She blinked quickly, holding back fresh tears. You are kinder than I expected. He gave a faint half-smile. I ain't kind, he said. I just don't see the use in punishing someone for surviving. The ranch grew closer. Alara's breathing steadied slowly. When they reached the log cabin, a brown dog, Copper, ran toward them, barking happily. Alara startled, then froze as the dog sniffed her skirt. It's all right, Silas said. That's Copper. He likes most people. Copper wagged his tail and nudged her hand. After a moment, she let out a small, uncertain laugh and bent down to pet him. Silas watched quietly. Inside the log cabin, everything was simple but clean. A stone hearth, a wooden table, shelves lined with a few worn books, a patchwork quilt folded neatly over the couch. Alara stepped in slowly, as if afraid she might disturb something. It's not grand, Silas said. It feels steady, she answered. He showed her the room he had prepared. Fresh linens, a small vase of wild prairie blossoms on the bedside table. She touched the petals gently. You gathered these? She asked. Figured a house shouldn't look empty when someone new walks in. She turned toward him, eyes softer now. Thank you. He stood in the doorway. Alara, he said. She looked up. If you stay, we do this honest. No pretending. No acting like you're someone you're not. I don't need a perfect wife. I need a partner. Her throat tightened. And if I'm afraid sometimes, she asked, then you say so. And if I make mistakes, you fix them same as I do. She took a slow breath. Outside, the wind moved through the grass. The world felt wide and uncertain. But inside that small room, something steadier began to take shape. I will stay, she said finally. Silas nodded once, as if that settled something deep inside him. Then welcome home, he replied. Alara looked around the room again, then back at him. For the first time since stepping off the stagecoach, her eyes were not filled with fear. They were filled with cautious hope. Neither of them knew how the town would react. Neither knew what storms might come. Neither knew how deeply past wounds could reach into a new life. But one thing had already changed. She had arrived in tears, and he had not asked her to hide them. The first week at Silas's spread passed quietly, But quiet did not mean easy. Alara woke before sunrise each morning, not because she was rested, but because sleep did not stay with her long. The log cabin creaked in the night. The wind moved across the plains like a living thing. Every sound felt unfamiliar. Every shadow felt larger than it should. Still, she rose from the narrow bed, dressed carefully, and went downstairs before Silas returned from barn. She wanted to prove she had not made a mistake. On the fourth morning, she was already kneading dough when Silas stepped inside, dust on his boots, and the smell of hay clinging to his coat. He paused when he saw her at the table, sleeves rolled up, flour on her cheek. You don't have to wake so early," he said. "I know," she answered, not looking up. "But I prefer to." He studied her for a moment. "Prefer to work or prefer not to lie awake?" Her hands stilled. She glanced at him, surprised. "Both," she admitted. He washed up at the basin and sat at the table. "You'll get used to the sounds." "I'm not afraid of the house," she said quickly. "I didn't say you were." She exhaled slowly and set the pan in the hearth oven. "I'm afraid of being useless," she corrected. Silas leaned back slightly in his chair. "You rode here alone from Ohio. That ain't useless." That was desperation. That was courage. The word hung between them. She did not argue, but she did not accept it either. After breakfast, Silas asked if she wanted to see more of the property. She agreed, though the thought of riding far from the log cabin tightened something in her chest. He saddled 2 horses and brought Daisy to her. "Her name's Daisy," he said, steady as they come. Alara placed her hand on the mare's neck. The animal's warmth soothed her in a way she did not expect. "You ride?" Silas asked. "My father taught me when I was young," she said softly. Before he passed, Silas nodded once and offered his hand to help her mount. She surprised him by swinging up on her own. He watched her settle into the saddle with quiet approval. They rode across open land that seemed to stretch without end. The sky was wide and pale blue, the grass shifting like waves under the breeze. Alara felt small beneath it all, but not in the same frightened way she had felt at the station. Silas pointed out the fence lines and the creek that cut through the property, the pasture where he kept most of the cattle. "This all yours?" she asked. "Ours?" he corrected calmly. "If you mean to stay." The word still startled her. "Ours." They rode in silence for a while until Alara spoke again. "Will the town speak about me?" Silas did not pretend not to understand. "They'll be curious," he said. "Curious ain't the same as cruel. And if they hear about my past?" He looked at her then, directly. "Alara, folks here care about who shows up when a fence breaks or a child's sick. They don't care much about rumors from 3 states away." She wanted to believe him. When they returned to Rattlesnake Ridge 2 days later for supplies, Alara's hands trembled slightly as they rode down the main street. She wore her simplest dress, neat but plain. She did not want to appear proud, but she did not want to appear weak either. Silas dismounted first and helped her down. Heads turned, not in judgment, in interest. At the general store, Martha Gable, a woman in her late 50s, greeted them with a bright smile. "You must be Mrs. Rook," she said warmly. Alara hesitated at the title. "Not yet," she replied gently, "but soon." Martha Gable's eyes softened. "You'll find this town small, but it holds together when it matters." Alara nodded politely, unsure what to say. As Silas spoke with the store owner about feed and tools, Alara wandered a few steps away, studying jars of preserves and bolts of fabric. She could feel eyes on her, but they did not burn the way they had back home. A young mother approached her shyly. "Are you the one who came from Ohio?" she asked. "Yes. I heard you were a school teacher." Alara blinked. "I was." The woman smiled. "We don't have much in the way of books here. My boy is just learning to read. Maybe you could help sometime." The request stunned her. Not suspicion, not accusation. A request. "I would like that," Alara said quietly. When Silas returned to her side, he noticed something had shifted in her expression. "You look steadier," he said. "I was asked to teach a child to read," she answered. "And no one asked why I left." Silas gave a small nod. "Told you." On the ride home, clouds began to gather in the distance. The air felt heavy. By evening, the storm broke. Rain slammed against the log cabin roof. Wind rattled the shutters, and thunder cracked across the sky. Alara jumped at the first loud strike, her breath catching sharply. Silas was already at the hearth, building the fire higher. "Huh, you ever been through a prairie storm?" he asked. "Not like this." He pulled a chair closer to the fire for her. "It sounds worse than it is," he said. "Log cabin is solid." Another crash of thunder shook the windows. Without thinking, Alara stepped closer to him. He noticed. He did not move away. "You're safe here," he said quietly. The words were simple, but they landed deep. She sank into the chair, her hands twisting in her lap. "In Ohio," she began slowly, "when the rumors spread, I would lie awake at night, imagining every whisper, every laugh, every door closing." Silas listened without interrupting. "I kept telling myself I was strong, that I did not care, but I cared. I care very much." Her voice wavered. "I do not want to be that woman again, the one who pretends nothing hurts." Silas crouched slightly, so he was level with her. "Then don't be," he said. She looked at him. "I don't need you fearless," he continued. "I need you honest." The storm raged outside, but inside the fire burned steady. She reached out before she could second-guess herself and rested her hand lightly on his sleeve. "Thank you," she whispered. He covered her hand with his own, firm and warm. They stayed that way until the thunder softened and the rain slowed to a gentle patter. The next morning, the air felt washed clean. Alara stepped outside alone while Silas was in the barn. The grass shimmered with droplets. The world looked renewed. She breathed deeply. For the first time since leaving Ohio, she did not feel like she was running. She heard hoofbeats before she saw the rider. A man approached from the far edge of the property, his posture confident, almost careless. He dismounted without waiting to be invited and tied his horse loosely to the fence. Alara's stomach tightened. "Morning," the stranger said. His eyes, cold and sharp, moved over her slowly. "You must be the new wife." "I am Alara Thorne," she answered evenly. He smirked. "Name's Cashin Flint. I own the property east of here." She had heard Silas mention him once. A neighbor, not a close one. "Silas around?" Cashin asked. "He is in the barn." Cashin stepped closer than necessary. "Hope you know what you signed up for," he said quietly. "Ranch life ain't kind to delicate women." Alara felt heat rise in her chest. "I did not come here for kindness," she replied. "I came for honesty." His eyes narrowed slightly. Before he could respond, Silas's voice cut through the air. "Cashin." The single word carried warning. Cashin straightened, a lazy smile returning. "Just welcoming your bride." Silas stepped beside Alara, not touching her, but close enough that she felt the shift in the air. "She don't need welcoming," Silas said calmly. "She's home." Cashin studied them both, then gave a short nod. "Suit yourself." He mounted his horse and rode off without another word. Alara watched until he disappeared over the rise. "Does he cause trouble?" she asked quietly. "Oh, he likes to test fences," Silas answered. "And people sometimes." She looked at him carefully. "Will he test me?" Silas's jaw tightened slightly. "Not if he's smart." Alara met his eyes. "And if he isn't?" Silas held her gaze. "Then he'll learn." The air between them shifted again, heavier this time. Alara realized something in that moment. Starting over did not mean the world would suddenly become gentle. It meant she would have to stand steady when it was not. She turned toward the log cabin, her back straight. Silas watched her walk. She had arrived in tears. But the woman stepping forward now looked different, stronger, and somewhere deep inside him, a quiet sense of pride began to grow. Neither of them knew yet how far that strength would be tested. The test came sooner than Alara expected. 3 days after Cashin Flint rode onto the property, whispers began moving through Rattlesnake Ridge like wind through tall grass. Alara felt at the moment she stepped into the general store alone. The room did not fall silent, but the air changed. Conversation softened. Eyes lingered a second longer than before. Martha Gable still greeted her kindly, but there was caution now. Alara kept her shoulders straight. She would not shrink. As she gathered flour and coffee in a calico bag, 2 men near the stove spoke in low voices. "Heard she left Ohio in a hurry. Some kind of scandal." Alara's fingers tightened around the bag in her hand. The words were not loud, but they were meant to be heard. She turned slowly and faced them. "I did leave in a hurry," she said calmly, "because I refused to marry a man who thought he could ruin my name when I said no." The store went quiet then. One of the men looked embarrassed. The other cleared his throat and looked away. Alara did not wait for approval. She paid for her goods and stepped back into the sunlight. Her heart pounded, but her steps did not falter. When she returned to the ranch, Silas was repairing a section of fence near the road. He saw her expression before she spoke. "Cashin," she said simply. Silas set down his wrench. "What did he say?" "Nothing to my face." She held his gaze. "But he's talking." Silas's jaw hardened. "I can handle gossip," Alara continued. "I just need to know if you believe it." The question was steady, direct. Silas walked toward her slowly. "I believe what I see," he said. "And what I see is a woman who wakes before dawn, works beside me without complaint, and speaks truth even when her voice shakes." Her eyes softened slightly. "That enough?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes." That evening, Cashin rode past again. This time, Silas met him at the edge of the property before he could reach the log cabin. Alara watched from the porch, her hands resting on the railing. The two men spoke in low voices at first. Then Cashin laughed. The sound carried across the open field. Silas did not raise his voice. He did not move aggressively. He simply stood his ground. After a long moment, Cashin's smile faded. He swung back onto his horse and rode away without another word. When Silas returned to the porch, Alara searched his face. "It's handled," he said. "What did you tell him?" "That if he's got something to say about my wife, he says it to me." The words settled deep in her chest. Asterisk wife, not mail order bride. Not stranger. Wife. Asterisk days passed. The whispers did not disappear overnight, but they weakened. Alara began helping Martha Gable's son with reading in the afternoons. Soon, two more children joined. They sat at the kitchen table while sunlight streamed through the window, their small voices sounding out simple words. Silas would pause in the doorway, sometimes listening. The log cabin no longer felt quiet. It felt alive. One evening after the children had left and the sky burned orange over the plains, Alara sat beside Silas on the porch steps. "I used to think starting over meant running away," she said softly. "And now?" he asked. "But now I think it means standing still long enough for roots to grow." Silas looked at her carefully. "You regret coming?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, I regret waiting so long to choose myself." The honesty between them felt easy now, not fragile. As autumn settled in, the town gathered for a harvest supper near the church. Long tables were set outside. Oil lamps glowed against the darkening sky. Alara hesitated before stepping from the buckboard. "You don't have to prove anything tonight," Silas said quietly. "I know," she answered. "I'm not here to prove. I'm here to belong." They walked together toward the tables. Conversations paused for a heartbeat, then resumed. Martha Gable waved them over. The children Alara taught ran up to her, showing off letters they had practiced. Cashin Flint stood near the far end of the table. For a moment Alara felt the old fear rise. Then she straightened. When Cashin approached, he removed his hat stiffly. "Mrs. Rook," he said. There was no smirk this time. No challenge. "Mr. Flint," she replied evenly. He hesitated. "Words fast out here," he muttered. "I may have spoken out of turn." Silas remained silent beside her. Alara studied Cashin for a long moment. "In my experience," she said calmly, "men who speak out of turn can learn to listen instead." A few nearby townsfolk hid small smiles. Cashin nodded once. "Seems you've done all right for yourself," he said grudgingly. "I have," she replied, and she meant it. The rest of the evening passed with laughter, shared food, and music from a warm banjo. Alara found herself smiling freely, not because she forced it, but because it rose naturally. When Silas took her hand to help her back into the buckboard, she did not hesitate. On the ride home, under a sky thick with stars, she leaned closer to him. "You stood by me," she said softly. "I married you," he answered. "That wasn't temporary." She rested her head lightly against his shoulder. "I was so certain I would have to keep defending myself forever." "Not here," he said. The log cabin greeted them with warmth and quiet. Later that night, as they lay side by side, Ilara traced a slow line along his arm. "I was crying when I arrived," she said. "You were? I thought it meant I was weak." Silas turned toward her. "No," he said gently. "It meant you were done pretending." She studied his face in the dim firelight. "And you meant what you said that day?" she asked. "I did. You still don't need me to pretend?" His hand brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Ilara, I don't want a woman who hides her storms. I want the one who walks through them." Her throat tightened, but her eyes stayed dry. "I'm not afraid anymore," she whispered. "Good," he said softly, "because neither am I." Outside, the wind moved across the plains, steady and strong. Inside, the log cabin felt anchored. Ilara closed her eyes and listened to the quiet breathing of the man beside her. She had arrived in Rattlesnake Ridge in tears, certain she was stepping into another life where she would have to be careful, guarded, smaller than she truly was. Instead, she had found something she had never known before. Not rescue, not perfection, but truth. And in that truth, she no longer needed to pretend. Not with him, not with herself. And under the wide Montana sky, that was more than enough.